Alright folks, we have a few more days to go. Black Myth Wukong is shaping out to be one of the most exciting releases of 2024. We have fast-paced action, an insane number of transformations, and a stunning game world, which is why today we'll take a look at everything you need to know before playing Black Myth Wukong. Also, to celebrate the launch, I'm giving away a full-on deluxe edition of the game available on all platforms. You just have to be a subscriber of the channel, like the video, and also leave a comment down below. The winner will be announced a couple of days before the game comes out. But Black Myth is an action RPG deeply rooted in Chinese mythology. Based on the 16th century novel Journey to the West, we follow the story of Sun Wukong, also known as the Monkey King. Throughout his journey, we get to encounter fascinating creatures, powerful enemies, all while mastering a wide array of techniques and spells. Loot is also abundant and will combine all of that to master an extremely dynamic combat style. Now, the game is not open world, but rather it features a more linear level design. While the full extent of exploration isn't completely known yet, levels will feature adjacent routes and even secret passages that can lead up to useful treasures and oftentimes also extra boss fights. Along the way, we'll get to find the incense shrines, which act kinda like bonfires, letting you replenish your HP, healing ward, as well as resetting the enemies. But they can also be used as fast travel points, as well as giving you access to crafting menus, letting you upgrade your gear in the process. Now, previously, there were also talks about the game length sitting anywhere between 15 to 20 hours. However, that was years ago, and recent rumors mention it being closer to 40 hours or even more. Additionally, while not officially confirmed yet, there are allegedly 160 plus enemy types, with around 80 of them actually being bosses. The story will also feature multiple endings. The game is also expected to launch with a new Game Plus mode at launch, so it definitely sounds like there's a lot to do in this game. Now, probably the most exciting part about Black Myth Wukong is its very fluid and fast-paced combat. It comes in contrast with the slower, more deliberate action that you maybe got accustomed with in Souls-like games. Combat consists of light and heavy attacks, dodges, special techniques, as well as transformations. When performing light attacks, this lets you build up your focus meter. You can think of this as kinda like your stamina bar. Once that bar is filled, you gain a focus point, which you can then spend to follow up with a much higher damage, heavy attack. You can fill up to 3 focus points this way, which is useful as you will eventually get even more stronger attacks that can consume 2 or even 3 focus points, but for a much stronger effect and impact. Later on, however, focus points will also let you use special moves unlocked from the game's skill tree. Dodges also play a massive role in the overall combat, as it's the only way to avoid damage. There's no dedicated block button, though there is going to be a skill later on that somewhat lets you deflect hits every now and then. And this is exactly why perfect dodges are so strong in this game. It leaves behind an after image. They also massively boost your focus meter, letting you spam abilities even more if you time it out perfectly. But you need to be careful about overdoing it, because you can only dodge up to 3 times in quick succession before you get hit by a rather lengthy recovery window at the end of the 3rd dodge. So you'll constantly do this dance of looking out for enemy openings while managing your focus and mana bar, squeezing in attacks and spells while trying to be on your toes for the next hit to dodge. Moving on though, we have the stances, another important aspect of combat to keep a track of, as it also alters the types of attacks that you can use. Now, currently there are at least 3 stances that we know of, including the smash stance, the pillar stance, and finally the thrust stance that players can easily switch between on the fly. So the smash stance is the first one that you start with by default at the beginning of the game and includes a lot of heavy as well as light attacks. Then we have the tower stance, which unlocks a bit later. This lets you lengthen and even stay on your staff for as long as your stamina bar holds out. This eventually charges up your focus point, and if you stay enough for that focus point to generate, you can then spend it to leap off with a super damaging overhead follow-up attack. This usually completely destroys enemies. Then we have the thrusting stance. This one has a very long range poke that we've seen against bosses before. It appears to be very good at knocking out enemies, but it does require a bit of a charge up. However, what makes stances so useful is how they let you dynamically change the skills that you use to better adapt to your combat environment. That's why skill trees will help a lot over here. There are multiple skill trees we get to unlock, and it kind of works like in Sekiro. So as you defeat enemies, you eventually gain XP, also known as will, which will fill out your XP bar. Once fully filled, you will gain what's called a spark that you can then spend to unlock extra abilities and perks in your skill trees. Sparks cannot be lost and can even be allocated at any time, even outside of the shrines, so you can do it pretty much at any time. However, should you perish before you manage to fill the XP bar completely, a portion of that XP will be lost in a similar Souls-like fashion. Now, there are multiple skill trees we get to unlock as we progress, with some of them being initially level locked. What's interesting though is that they feature both active and passive abilities, so while you can improve passive attributes such as stamina consumption or damage, you can also gain active abilities to mix in with your normal attacks. So let's take a look at some of these active abilities you can get rather early on. We've seen quite a few of them, and one thing to note about them is that they both consume focus but also mana, so you have to pay attention to that resource as well. Some of the examples include the Clone Summon, aka the Pluck of Many. This lets you summon multiple clones of yourself by plucking a strand of hair from your head, and they can be a great way to cause a distraction or even provide some extra damage. Then we have Immobilize. This was said to be one of the best and probably most OP spell in some of the gameplay demos. This basically completely freezes a target in place, letting you squeeze in some extra attacks before it goes away. And this seems to immobilize targets very well, even bosses, for a pretty long duration. However, it was said that some of the larger enemies and tougher bosses can more easily shrug it off. Then we also saw Rock Solid. This lets you completely tank one hit, but then it also lets you follow up with a counter move. So this is why I said that we kinda have a parry attack, but it's mostly this. It's kind of like a deflect mechanic. And there were plenty more that we've seen in older gameplay footage, with lots more to follow from the skill trees. This brings us to transformations. Shapeshifting is one of the core mechanics of the game and will give you a large diversity of extra moves and mechanics to combo into your normal attack chains. First of all, there are at least 20 transformations that Monkey King can switch into, with a rumored of 70 plus in the full game, mostly from defeating bosses, acquiring their special weapons, or by extracting their powers. You don't really get to have other weapons besides your staff in the normal form, but with these transformations, you gain both the powers and the weapons from the bosses that you got them from. Now, these forms typically provide an extra HP bar as well as an entirely new set of attacks that you can freely use. However, staying in these forms will consume your focus meter, and once it's depleted, you revert back to your regular monkey form, meaning that you can stay in them indefinitely and will have to time their use strategically. Switching into a lot of these forms seems to be so seamless. You're pretty much encouraged to come up with your own combos, going with the normal attack chain and then following up with a transformation and using that attack from that specific transformation. This is actually going to be something you can pull off to create your own combat style. So going over a brief summary of all the forms we've seen up until now, we have the Fireblade Wolf. This is an even more agile, higher damage form that uses a fire staff. Then we have the Boulder form, a slower moving, high HP transformation that smashes its body into enemies. We've seen the Poison Monk form. This inflicts heavy amounts of poison into enemies and even features a high damage AoE poison effect. The fourth one would be the Tentacle form, self-explanatory. It uses a pair of tentacles for some extra moves, such as throwing rocks, but also powers up your jumping attacks. We've seen the Two-Headed Rat. The left half of it is using melee attacks with a serrated blade, while the right half features heavy damage fire attacks and explosions. The Big Head Monk form, self-explanatory. It headbutts enemies, leaving them staggered. Rapid Fire uses a ranged weapon to unleash a flurry of exploding projectiles into the enemy's body. The Red Blade Dancer, which features slick acrobatic moves that let him fade in and out of sight. Then the Monkey form with a big katana. Spectral Monk form, which seems to be capable of making its body immaterial, avoiding damage in the process. A Spiked Fight form, which has a dash attack that lets him summon spikes out of its body when following up with a heavy attack. The dual dagger wolf form, as implied, it wields a pair of reversed dagger that it quickly slashes the enemies with. A giant lion head form, which uses a large sword to slash at the enemies. A tree/vegetation form used to confuse enemies, or at the very least avoid some of the aggro. Could be a good way to blend in the environment. Then we have several traversal forms. We've seen insect, wolf, rhino, and even a bat, possibly more, that let you skip over enemies, traverse a bit better, and basically just go to places in a cool style. And finally, devil trigger monkey. This is what it's called, a larger monkey that does a lot of AoE stomp attacks. There's probably another one that I'm missing. Generally, you're going to find a lot of these from most of the bosses you get to fight with. And keep in mind, we haven't even covered all the other stuff that you can do, all the role-playing related stuff, such as crafting. This is another important aspect of the gameplay. So as we play, we get to find resources, unique drops, and we also get a currency that we can spend at various shops to buy supplies. But some of those resources, as well as the currency, we will get to use that in crafting armor. So there are many armor sets that we'll get to find or craft, which also give extra bonuses the more pieces of that set we have equipped. This includes helmet, chest piece, arms, as well as feet that we can equip, but also we can mix and match if we find different pieces with stronger effects. Furthermore, weapons and healing flasks can also be upgraded for stronger effects. Kind of like in Elden Ring, you can power up and have much better healing effects. So it's not just fighting that you have to look out for, but also the extra routes that might bring you to a secret treasure chest, as well as resources scattered all around the environment that you can go ahead and pick up. Additionally, earned currency can also be used to buy consumables at the various shop vendors that we find in different maps. While generally there aren't many big hubs out there, there are many of these shops we can encounter, some of which will provide buffs such as increasing damage, or even flasks that increase resistances such as fire, electricity, and other similar effects. In fact, healing ward and elixirs are going to be a huge part of the gameplay, as you're constantly going to try to deal damage while keeping tabs of your own HP bar. And all of this is going to be important to nail down and upgrade, as bosses in this game aren't just numerous, they are also relentless. So as you progress in the game, you're going to fight increasingly stronger and more difficult foes. Bosses are highly aggressive, with many of them requiring careful planning and strategic use of skills when the time is right or when you find an opening. It's also a very cinematic game. It looks really awesome. There are some very unique boss designs over here, and most of all, a lot of them also have second phases, so they become even more aggressive and have even stronger attacks in the second phase. Plus, it appears that there are some rumors some of the phases can be triggered in a special way, so who knows, maybe there are some special rewards if you trigger them in a different way, such as defeating enemies in a certain amount of time so that you can trigger that secondary phase. In any case, the game comes out on the 20th, and as we've seen from the final reveal trailer, yeah, the soundtrack is an absolute killer. I really hope that we're gonna get a full OST release on YouTube, or at least on Spotify. And we also have several editions of the game which are priced, in my opinion, really well. We have the standard edition at $60, which also comes with the Trailblazer Scarlet Gourd as a pre-order bonus. However, if you go for the digital edition, you get that, as well as this really awesome folk opera armor set, the bronze cloud staff, some wind chimes, and the digital soundtrack. Or you can go for the full collector's edition at $3.99. It has all of these goodies, including the deluxe edition and the pre-order, plus all the physical collectibles like the steelbook case, also this awesome statue of Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, and many other things you can see right here. So really excited for Black Myth Wukong. Just a few more days until then. And if you're also excited, or if you enjoyed this video, also don't forget to subscribe, activate the notification bell, and leave a like on the video for more content like this. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time.